What is going on, my good people? I just wanted to come on here and I wanted to speak about something that's quite important to me. As I'm in this sort of limbo area of figuring out what I want to do with this channel, the things that I want to speak about, the bringing out the authenticity, bringing out my true character across all of my social media platforms. I think I need to start following my intuition and not limiting my thoughts and what I believe in and what I speak about the things that I'm into. I want to share that with you. And I look at the world today and I see a lot of the things that are going on, the major world events, especially today with the passing or the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And it sort of inspired me in a way to share things that I've researched in the past that maybe perhaps could benefit people. And actually, the goal of what I wanted to do today was to share some insights that I personally stumbled across many years ago that act as a foundation for how, as David Icke calls it, the totalitarian tiptoe, how the elitism works and how these plans are put in place um, to move society along or to move the world along in a very coordinated path that isn't necessarily aligned with our best interests or even the divine will. And in doing so, I hope to share some of the other things that I have begun to learn over the last few years regarding the psyche, regarding dreams, regarding alchemy, and how I view that in my mind and how it relates to the world. So, in this video, I do want to talk about mind wars. I do want to talk about psychological operations. I do want to talk about documents that have been made by military officials back in the 1980s that perfectly and succinctly give us an idea or tell us what they have been planning for a long time and how they achieve and how they aim to achieve disruption, right? How they aim to achieve control, how they aim to achieve a population that is subdued. And ultimately, you realize I don't play the game of politics. I don't look into it often. My political knowledge isn't great. Um, and I don't think you need to have great political knowledge to actually see the foundations of the plan, right? And I want to share with you those things. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you can see, right? Hopefully you can see that. So it starts with a guy called Michael Aquino. And actually, how I came across this information is actually not really my research. And I will hold my hands up. It isn't my research. I was just fortunate enough many years ago to come across well put videos by a person you may know called Matthew North, who was an absolute incredible researcher. He was 23 years old. He was putting out a lot of information, connecting military, psychological operations, corporations, key people within that, and what's going on in the truther community, quote unquote, truther community, or the alternative news community. And he did a big expose on Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, their connection with the Church of Set, with Satanism, with the Echelon Institute, where all of the propaganda in a way, or all the various trends have been put forward through these platforms, through the alternative media that's really shaping the psyche of society, that's shaping the psyche of people who are becoming aware. And it all ties into this greater thing, which is mind wars. Right. So I was very fortunate enough to come across his videos. Unfortunately, Matthew North um, passed away. Um, I won't go into detail about that, but he was 23 years old. He was very young, and it was quite upsetting when I found out about that. But we're going to talk about this anyway, because I think his research was just phenomenal. And he was talking about this very key person called Michael Aquino. Some of you might know who he is. He was an American political scientist, military officer, and a Satanist. He was a very interesting character in the military. He was born October 16th, 1946, and he died in 2019. And so he was also a specialist in psychological warfare, military agents, intelligence, and an officer in the US Army. So he was a head of or worked within the PSYOP division within the military. So he actively worked on psychological operations and warfare. How can we use propaganda to give us give America an advantage within a war? And the reason why he's interesting is because he is a Satanist, and he actually founded the church or the temple of Set, which is this sort of Satanistic, but it was more occultish. He actually first joined Anton LaVey's Satanic Church, but he fell out of alignment with some of those principles, some of those Satanistic principles, and he founded his own temple. Now, Michael Aquino, if you actually look into him, there's a lot of stuff on him that he was accused for abusing underage children, and you know what the stuff is, the freaking satanic stuff that they do. And he has a lot of cases against him. There's videos you can watch online where he speaks about this. But the main thing was in 1980, I believe, he developed a document called Mind Wars, right? This document from PSYOP to Mind War, and it was this time in history where they realized, or the military realized, or he realized that PSYOP, psychological warfare, using propaganda, was not working anymore. Propaganda is where you actually deceive using lies. There's nothing truthful about propaganda. It's very forceful. And he started to realize that this wasn't working in a military sense. You could not influence another country or the population of another country in a warfare scenario using propaganda because what would happen over time is these people will start to realize the propaganda, and the propaganda wouldn't work, or the psyop wouldn't work if they withdraw their consent from it, right? So it didn't have the power. And so what he found was that when countries were going into war and they were doing the psyops, it was literally just about who could psyop more, right? Who had the more powerful psyop. And they would have the edge in the war, but it wasn't concrete enough for Michael Aquino. It wasn't an advantage. There was too many flaws. So he developed something called MindWar, and this was a revolutionary take on psychological warfare. And bear in mind, I'm sharing all this stuff and I'm going to tie it into what's going on in the world in the best way that I possibly can. And Matthew North did a much, much better job than what I'm going to do, but hopefully I can give you some context with some stuff that's going on today. So, this was the time where um, there was something called the Revolution in Military Affairs, the RMA, which was basically a hypothesis for how military can improve for future warfare. And so how they can use technology, how they can use the mind of people to have better military strategies. And a lot of that was coming from Soviet stuff. So a lot of the revolution in military affairs was Soviet warfare theories. Okay, and this is what also inspired Michael Aquino's PSYOP Mind War. And and not only this was there's actually videos out there. There's a video out there that talks about Michael Aquino's talking about how he got a lot of this stuff from the Echelon Institute. And because the Echelon Institute was an institute that was developed mainly, it was a very sort of hippie development, but it was an institute that inspired depth into the psyche, where they would study the subconscious mind. And Michael Aquino was part of the Echelon Institute in a way. He was very, very involved in that. And so he learned a lot about the human unconscious, the human subconscious mind, and how that is influenced by information. And so, of course, he's been doing this for like 40 plus years. So he's written this document. And so everything that I just talked about before about sort of like he's talking about how psychological operations, they no longer work. And so it's birthed a new theory or warfare theory called Mind Wars. And he just talks a little bit about that. And so here we'll just talk a little bit about the very, very important parts of this document. Bear in mind, this is a document that is shaping military warfare. Okay? It's shaping how you manipulate the minds of people. So this can fizzle out into all types of areas, all types of institutions that control beings, that control humans. So the theories laid out here, as you will see, are playing out in our reality. And we can debate who's doing that. We can debate and point our finger at it's this person, it's that group, it is that country, it's that religion. But we can just boil it down to say it's elitism, right? The quote unquote elites kind of know these things, right? And I want to just share with you now what it goes into. So he's talking here, right? He's talking about the propagandists, which is the psychological operations, which is what they were doing. And he's saying the difference between a propagandist and somebody who is a part of the mind war group, right? The new mind war theory. So the propagandist, which is like the old PSYOP stuff, the propagandist is not and cannot be a believer, quote unquote. Moreover, he cannot believe in the ideology he must use in his propaganda. He is merely a man at the service of a party, a state, or some other organization, and his task is to ensure the efficiency of that organization. If the propagandist has any political conviction, he must put it aside in order to be able to use some popular mass ideology. He cannot even share that ideology, for he must use it as an object and manipulate it without the respect that he would have for it if he had believed in it. He quickly acquires contempt for these popular images and beliefs. What he's basically saying is that when you've got institutions, characters, okay, elected officials, um, politicians that are playing the role of the propagandist, there is a flaw in it that they don't actually believe, or they may not actually believe in the propaganda. They're not very easily controlled. It's not very believable for the mass of people. There's a lot of effort and there's a lot of flaws within that. So he says, unlike PSYOP, unlike the propagandist, MindWar has nothing to do with deception or even with selected and therefore misleading truth. Rather, it states a whole truth that if it does not now exist, will be forced into existence by the will of the United States. Okay? So what he's saying is there is no need to lie in this new warfare theory. We take bits of truth and we weaponize truth. We don't have to lie anymore. We can have politicians, we can have institutions, we can have propped up radical, quote unquote, people that are speaking a truth, and that's all that needs to happen. They don't need to be lying. They can believe fully and truly in what they are preaching. Okay? So, and he talks about how this is all about rapport, and this is nothing that can be easily faked. If in fact it can be faked at all. Rapport, which is the comprehensive dictionary of psychological and psychoanalytical terms defines as unconstrained relations of mutual confidence. Approaches the subliminal. Some researchers have suggested that it is itself a subconscious and even perhaps an ESP-based accent to an over exchange of information. So what he's saying is when we build rapport with people, there is a subconscious tendency, there's a subconscious connection that's happening, that it passes consciousness. When we build rapport with somebody, we're not consciously, hi, I'm building rapport with you. We're building rapport with them because there's something about how they're appearing. There's something about their energy, something about what they're putting forward and out into consciousness that we haven't even picked up on yet, but we resonate with it. So why does one believe one's one television newsman more than another, even though both may report the same headlines? The answer is that there is rapport in the former case, and it is a rapport which has been recognized and cultivated by the most successful broadcasters. We have covered the statement of inevitable truth and the conviction behind that statement. These are qualities of the mind war operative himself. A mind war operative. Okay, so he's convinced by his own truth. The recipient of the statement will judge such messages not only by his conscious understanding of them, but also by mental conditions under which he receives them. Resonance, right? That's resonance, morphic resonance. The theory behind brainwashing, quote unquote, was that physical torture and deprivation would weaken the mind's resistance to suggestion. And this was true to a point, but in the long run, brainwashing does not work because intelligent minds later realize their suggestibility under such conditions and therefore discount impressions and options inculcated accordingly. So the best way I can put that is, like when you were unaware of a movie and all the flashing images and the propaganda and all of the subliminals in movies, when you're unaware of it, you're influenced by it. But once there is awareness and the defenses are down and the resistances to and there is a resistance to the suggestibility of it, you can see through all the bullshit. You're no longer influenced by the propaganda anymore. You're no longer influenced by the subliminals. So so this new mind war operative will not need to brainwash people, will not need to use will not need to use subconscious programming or anything like that. They won't need to use subliminals in what they do. They can be themselves. For the mind to believe in its own decisions, it must feel that it made those decisions without coercion. Coercive measures used by the operative consequently must not be detectable by ordinary means. So if they are going to use coercive measures, it needs to be some really deep psychological, unconscious manipulation that's going on. There is no need to resort to mind-weakening drugs such as those explored by the CIA. In fact, that exposure of a single such method would be unacceptable, that would do unacceptable damage to MindWar's reputation for truth. Like we're saying, there is no need to tarnish the person. There's no need. The person can be themselves. The MindWar operative can be themselves and be convinced in what they believe in a particular truth. This mind war operative, which is being outlined by, bear in mind, this is the 1980s, okay, is pinpointing what is happening today when we see people on the world scale being propped up, almost like an archetype, right? And people are resonating with them. People are, they don't need to lie much, you know? They can be themselves. Elon Musk believes we can get to the moon. Elon Musk believes in electric cars, right? They're not deceiving anybody. There is a sort of truth in it, right? Here's a better example, Alex Jones. This is the truther community or the alternative media community being hijacked. Okay. We're not going to go into these people directly. You can have your own opinions and thoughts, but it's this idea that people are placed, these mind war operatives are placed in key specific areas to shape public opinion, to shape the minds of the masses. And it's easy because you can pick your favorite character and you can resonate with them. You're not going to be coerced into believing what they believe. And this is what creates polarization, right? Think about it. The people that believe in Andrew Tate believe it. There is truth in what he says. There is truth in what Alex Jones says. There is truth in what Elon Musk says. There's truth in it. There's no need to lie. So we believe them, or people believe them. and they gain mass followings. And they've gained this sort of archetypal projected energy that can shift public perception and can create tremendous polarization. Tremendous polarization. This is warfare, right? Charlie Kirk was shot today. And the thing is, many of these may not even know that they are part of it. I think many of them do, but many of them don't. And so when we've created so much polarization, when we've propped up these mind war operatives and they're shaping public opinion, they're shaping the minds of the masses, they're bringing libido, they're bringing fire to these opinions that people hold, that people have resonated with. And then, for example, you martyr Charlie Kirk, or you martyr George Floyd, or we always get the martyrs, RFK. You martyr them. And this is where the psychological operation follows a alchemical path. This is where I believe the elites are onto something in terms of how to create transformation within a society that they desire. Okay, so if we look at alchemy, and we look at the various stages of alchemy, the reason why we go back to alchemy is because it is the fundamental language of everything, of our reality, of our dreams, of our psychological processes when we're transmuting emotions, when we're deeply feeling or going through a very deep psychological pattern, whether it's ancestral, whether it's a pattern we've created in our own reality. When we're moving through those worlds within us, it follows the principles of alchemy. The world itself follows principles of alchemy. The water flowing down from a mountain to the sea is an alchemical process. So, with that being said, there are these stages in alchemy that the alchemists have mapped out. And alchemy was originally a science to find out um, or to turn base metals into gold. And it was this chemical process that it started out. But what the alchemists found out was that these chemical processes actually mapped out psychological processes. And so all the alchemical tests, all the alchemical texts, even if you read them and you look at them now, they're not just chemical. It's not just about a chemical process. Finding the philosopher's stone, the stone that can change any metal into gold, the stone that has that power of transformation is an inward process, is an inner process. And if you look into the works of Carl Jung and things like that, I think you find wonderful information about that inner process. But anyway, the alchemists, they found a process of different stages of what happens when you mix these metals, you purify or you burn a metal, you purify it, and then you're left with the condensed essence of it, and then you refine that even further. It's all mapped out in stages, and those stages are the black stage, which is the Negredo stage, the Albedo, and then the Rubedo, the red stage. So you have the black, white, and the red, right? And the reason why I think this is important to know is because these are laws. These are laws of transformation. These are laws of transformation, inner transformation, and outer transformation, because the outer mimics the inner. And so what this transformation suggests is that there's always starts off with the blackening, the dissolution phase, the phase of chaos, the phase of death. And this can be akin to the elites creating tremendous polarization, left and right, male, female, masculine, female, right? Truth, no truth. Tremendous polarizations that collect so much collective psychic energy, so much tension. That's the blackening, okay? That is the blackening. And then the finalization of the blackening of the Negredo phase is the death. Because the death, what that does is it allows the elites, quote unquote, to the albedo phase is the phase of the white phase is the inner process and the outer process of clarity, of purification. And so when this happens, and we've gone through the Negredo, the blackening, the chaos, the fire, the death, and we have the death of one of these MindWar operatives. I'm not going to go ahead and call him that, but I'm just giving you an example. Then the elites gain a sense of clarity. They gain a sense of purification. The factions are divided. They've seen the outrage. They've seen how it's all distilled into we have this section against this section. We have this group of people that think this. We have this group of people that are out of the system. We have this group of people that are in it and not in it. We have all of these various factions. There is truth. They've gained clarity over this tremendous polarization, right? Because within the chaos, it's difficult to see, even as an elitist. It's difficult to see where everything is going, where everything is. So, a process like this, the death, which again happens psychologically, when there's tremendous tension and polarization within the mind of two opposing psychic beliefs, there has to be the death of something in order for that tension to settle, in order for clarity to come, right? Psychological death, but it's also on the world stage. So there we've got the the albedo phase. And then we've got the rubedo phase, which is the transformation, which is now the divine light has come in and the transformation has happened. The process of unfolding a new way of seeing, a new perception. Okay. But you see, in Jungian terms, you have two types of rubedo. So with rubedo, we have two kinds of rubedo. And even though Jung didn't actually call it a false rubedo, we have a rubedo, which is the transformation that's actually in alignment with the divine will, where the transformation is for a it has brought you closer to wholeness, right? That would be successful rubedo process that happens when you really hold the tension of the opposites within the mind and you allow that to unfold. You gain the clarity of the albedo, you gain the perspective of the albedo, and then now you have the rubedo, which is the transformation. But you see, what sometimes can happen in that alchemical process is there can be a premature arrival at the rubedo, or what more people are calling the false rubedo now. And that is where the transformation isn't in accordance with divine will, where the transformation isn't truly complete and it isn't towards wholeness, it is towards control, it is towards more misconception, more deception, like this, right? like this. So what we see here in the outer stage, in the outer world, is we have the chaos, we have the tension of war, and then we have the death, we have the major collapsing. Then we have some of the Rubedo, then we have some of the Albedo, right, which is the military, the the elites gaining clarity of the various factions who oppose, who don't oppose, who have this thought, who have that thought. But then we have the false rubedo of further security, further sanctions, okay, justification for warfare, further control. That's what happened after this. So that's a false rubedo. Now we could wonder what the false rubedo is going on now. So I just had this thought today. Like I literally just sort of tried to map it out in my mind because I felt like there was a resonance, you know? I genuinely felt like there was some kind of resonance with what's happening within us psychologically, the alchemical processes, and how that's unfolding on the world stage. And I feel like there is something to it. If you would like to learn more about Michael Aquino, Mind Wars, and how it connects to all of these people in these positions of quote unquote power who are on the main stage, who are controlling public narrative, public opinion, from alternative news to even just mainstream, then I do recommend you look into Matthew North. You can find some of his work on Odyssey. And let me see if I can share with you actually. Again, if we go Matthew North Odyssey. Yeah. And you can watch some of these videos. I think someone else runs that channel now, but or has uploaded all of his videos here. So you have these videos here, right? Joe Rogan exposed CIA, Elon Musk, Echelon military. Watch this video, right? Watch this video, Deeper Connections, Alex Jones and Joe Rogan exposed. They are some of the best videos you'll watch, and they explain so much about what's going on. And that gives us clarity. It gives us clarity because it tells us that we're being used for somebody else's false alchemical process. They're alchemizing people's unconsciousness. They're using people's unconsciousness to further take them further into a path that is not in accordance with the divine will, which suggests one thing: internal alchemy is the way to remove yourself from the circus of the outside world and to draw the energy, to draw the libido within you and start working on the various patterns and the various unconscious tendencies within yourself, because that's actually where the work is done. The work is never done when we're going outside and we're protesting and we're trying to demand change. The work is done when we can slowly shift the collective patterns of humanity through doing our own inner work. In a lot of spiritual beliefs, there is always this notion that only a handful of people need to be doing this in order to shift the consciousness of humanity, right? So there doesn't need to be so many of us doing it, but the right people doing it with the right intensity and following the right principles can actually shift consciousness because we're all in this web of it. We're all connected in this web of consciousness because within each of us carries the collective unconscious patterns. But we put it outside there and we say we're not that. That's not part of us. because we separate ourselves from what we're not, when in reality, we are it. So we do have collective unconscious tendencies within us that we can access, that we can transmute using those alchemical processes. So the more we do that, the more we won't be in their false alchemical process, the manipulated alchemical process. So when you have world events that are going on now like that, like Charlie Kirk and you name it, all the ones that have happened in the past and all the ones that will continue to happen, you're not drawn into the emotionality of it. You're not drawn into the factions. You're not part of their process. You're part of your own process. And that is one thing that they haven't taken into account, that the more of us that do that, the more difficult time they're going to have formulating these plans. Anyway, I thought that I hope that video has been helpful, to any of you out there. Please share it. If you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the research, please like, follow, subscribe, do all that stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Peace.